My friend and the incredible Ashley Lamb-Sinclair is an award-winning educator, author, and National Geographic Explorer. She is the 2016 Kentucky Teacher of the Year, who served as the inaugural educator in residence with the State Department of Education, where she led efforts to amplify educator voice and agency in shaping policy and practice. After 15 years as a national board certified classroom educator, Ashley founded and spearheaded an edtech platform to elevate creative idea development and authentic collaboration among educators. She has contributed to several publications and has just done incredible work and now leads 2892 Miles to Go, which is doing some incredible work with youth empowerment, which we'll learn about in today's episode. She is also an Obama Foundation USA leader, which is where Ashley and I first connected and got to know each other. She lives in Kentucky with her husband, two daughters, and I'm just I'm just so excited for you to hear her story, her impact, and how she got where she is today. Take a listen. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm so excited to have you on.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, and it's just so funny how quickly we became connected and friends and just wanting to work together on different things. It's one of my favorite things to just watch is like you get to build a relationship with someone. You're like, wow, we have a lot of things in common that we want to do and that we're passionate about.
Yeah, yeah. Co-conspirators
Yes,
developing over time for sure. Yeah.
absolutely. To give people some background on you, I'd love for you to just tell us about your journey so far, because you've had just the most fascinating um, career and experiences being the classroom teacher, an ed tech founder, like all of these things. So can you maybe just take us back a bit and give us the story of you and a little bit about your journey?
Yeah. I guess I can start with so I'm born and raised in Kentucky, still based here in Kentucky. And I started teaching straight out of college and loved it. I taught English from high school, then middle, then high school again, over about 14, 15 years, and loved every second of it. Like it was great. Well, you know what? Honestly, I didn't love every second. There were definitely like low points, but it was fun. And I was really passionate about it. And I kind of fell into this opportunity with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. They had asked for teacher input. And I submitted an idea and it turned into this crazy like 5 year long journey of creating an ed tech company, becoming the CEO, leading it, learning a whole heck of a lot, making a ton of mistakes. Um, and then I ended up at National Geographic in the fall of 2019 as an education fellow, which was a role, they don't have those anymore, but essentially you're kind of quasi staff, but you are not. So it's like this, it's a contract role where you do a lot of programmatic and behind the scenes stuff, you know? And then of course 2020 happened and that like changed the game for all of us. And what I came on as a fellow to do is not what I ended up doing. And in the summer of 2020, I proposed a program to National Geographic called 2892 Miles to Go, which is what I lead to this day. So it's been 5 years now. It's kind of crazy that it feels like just yesterday. But I'm sure we'll get into more about what 2892 does. But essentially, the idea is to connect young people directly to community work and leaders in the community, and really give young people the opportunity to learn about history, to explore narratives that are often not part of the conversation, not often, usually not part of the conversation, and then address issues in their community that matter to them in a really authentic way. So yeah, so that's in a nutshell. And I also write, which is really my passion, and is mostly how I identify as a writer at the end of the day. So,
And we'll include links to some of your writing because it's really incredible to read and learn all about. What I love about what you do, and we've had conversations about this, is making sure that the people that are involved in decisions and have directly impacted by the outcomes are at the table. And you've done a lot of this work, but let's talk about the teacher side of it too, amplifying teacher voices and especially in policy. So could you maybe talk to us a bit about your experiences leading that and maybe some challenges that you faced getting educators a seat at these policy making tables?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to tell you that honestly was another situation. I just happened to be at the right place at the right time, like, and take a leap when the leap, when the cliff arises. But a lot of it is just kind of falling into stuff and being in the right place at the right time. But basically, I had no experience with policy. It's still not my expertise in any stretch of the imagination. But in 2016, I was named the Kentucky Teacher of the Year, which was a life-changing opportunity on a whole, so many levels. But I was actually the first Kentucky Teacher of the Year to have the opportunity to take a sabbatical working with the Kentucky Department of Education. And so it was also at a really crazy time in Kentucky's educational landscape. We had a new governor. Literally, I was named Teacher of the Year, and we had a new state commissioner who was named like a week prior to that, and a new governor who was named like 2 weeks after that. And there was a lot of political issues that when I stepped into my role as a teacher in residence at the department in January of that year, it was immediately like trial by fire, like figure it out. Um, and so I think on like the fifth day that I was there, I was in this closed door meeting, um, and a bill had been dropped, which was a sweeping education reform bill that had been dropped kind of in the middle of the night, and everybody was getting it at then. And I got a copy of this not yet public 90-page bill. And I took it home and read it cover to cover. And it was like the first time I'd ever read a bill. Like, I no idea. And I did what I always do, which is call people who are smarter than me. And as I'm reading this bill, I'm calling all my like teacher friends and I'm like, listen to this. Can you believe this? Like, there was just a lot of like shocking stuff. And it really just hit me especially as a classroom teacher who had no experience in policy. Like, all of these decisions are going to get made without teachers really knowing what's happening. Like, by the time most teachers get to the point where they're like policy as something that's on their mind, it's already done. It's a done deal. And so we kind of, this scrappy little group of like 10 of us, we created this thing called KY Ed Policy. And it was a website, and it turned into really just kind of a network. And the premise was essentially to get teachers to talk to and share their input with Kentucky legislators. And they did. And honestly, I got the person that drafted that bill, who is fundamentally different from me politically. They agreed to be interviewed by two social studies teachers on camera, and it was a great interview. We sent it out to teachers across the state. Teachers were submitting their opinions to this bill. And it ended up, that was part of it, but there were a lot of other people, of course, behind the scenes at the department and everywhere who were helping to shift it. But by the time that bill passed, it was significantly different than when it had been proposed. And it really just taught me that anybody can and should, you know, pay attention, because I wasn't paying attention prior to that. It's hard to pay attention to everything when you're in the classroom and you're busy with kids and lesson plans and all kinds of stuff. But it definitely was a lesson learned.
Mm, absolutely. Wow. And I'm so glad you mentioned that too about somebody just being on a completely different, political, mindset, right? Saying, hey, let's work together, right?
Yeah.
Like sometimes
Yeah.
we don't see that as much. And unfortunately, today we don't.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it was really cool. It was a lesson learned. Um, I mean, really everything comes down to relationships.
Mhm.
At the local and the state level, I won't speak to other
Mhm.
layers, but for me, I do feel like there's a lot of relationship building that can move things easier than we think.
Absolutely. Now, also going along this, your experiences as an educator and teacher, you wrote a book, and we're going to include the link to the book in this episode. But from underestimated to unstoppable, and this is about driving change in the classroom. So, can you tell us more about that too? Because I love just the idea, thought, and mission behind it.
Yeah, so that was another, again, like writing has been my lifelong dream. I mean, it's the thing that I do that I never complain about. It always feels good, like I just love it. And I wrote this book during the pandemic. Well, I wrote the premise and the proposal in the first few chapters. And really, that came because part of my role at National Geographic as a fellow was essentially talking to teachers around the world. I mean, that's what I did. The bulk of my time was learning from teachers at a very consequential moment in education history, to be honest. So I learned a lot. I also think because I took this weird leap out of the classroom, I didn't take a traditional path in terms of like becoming a principal or, whatever. Like I did this like weird starting my own company thing. I think in some ways I was kind of a safe space for teachers. So I would get a lot of like unsolicited advice that I happily, would solicit. Um, and it would be, or I'm sorry, I would get a request for a lot of advice. Um, and it would be things like this, like a Twitter DM from some teacher who's like, I have this awesome idea, but, or it would be a colleague who was like, I want to change roles, but I don't know how to do it, or I think my district is going down a wrong path. I've got an idea. There was a lot of that, but there was always a but. There was always a I can't do it because. And I think it's because when we think of change leaders, when we think of change agents, we think of these amazing people in history who rightly have our imagination, like people who have the bullhorn, stand at the podium, who are great orators, who can get people in the streets, stuff like that. And they are critical. But there's also so many people that we don't see and we don't know whose talents make that moment possible. And so this whole idea of archetypes is something that's been a part of my life for a long time because archetypes are stories and characters. And as an English teacher and a writer, it's just something that I spend a lot of time learning about. And so I was really inspired to write a book that kind of married this idea of leaning into who you are at your core and using that to drive change in a way that is true to you. Like when I would talk to these teachers, I would be like, you don't have to go be like a leader in a protest in order to do something cool. Like you don't have to be a school principal to make something awesome happen. And so that's really kind of the premise of like where it came from was really just responding to this moment. And writing that book was the joy of my life. I loved it. I loved every minute of writing it. And the archetypes kind of arose really naturally because I just started thinking about awesome people that I knew who had led change successfully and how did they do it? And then talking to them like really to get to the core of who they were and why they moved, changed the way they did. And so there's things like a champion who is someone who's super passionate about a cause and a natural advocate. And then there's like a guardian who is really rooted in relationships, really protective of their people. And we all know these people and we've all experienced in a lot of work situations these kind of perspectives. Archetypes are not new. There's nothing new under the sun about them. But helping teachers kind of lean into who they really are in order to move change, because I fundamentally believe then and I believe now the only way we're going to change this system is through teachers. I mean, I just don't think there's really any other way. I don't think people in traditional positions of, power are going to move that change. It has to be the teachers who are living it,
Absolutely. And I know we'll get into some advice later, but I'm really curious as somebody that has loved reading and is always interested in just the process of writing a book. Can you bring us back to that moment? Like, how did you? Because the problem that I typically have is I have so much I want to say, and I just can't get it organized.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so because I had written like essays and I had like dabbled a little bit in the world of writing in the education universe, I knew some people. So I started by once I had this idea and I knew there was something there, I reached out to people I knew and basically asked them like, do you know any editors that I could talk to? So I kind of like started there. Like once I had enough of a vision, I started asking around and I found a couple of editors at a couple different publishing houses that did publish for teachers. And I landed on one, Susan Hills, who is at ASCD and loved her immediately. She got the vision and she really coached me through like writing the proposal. Because with nonfiction, like you typically nonfiction in this context, you typically like write a proposal in a first chapter or two. It goes for peer review. So they would send it out to other teachers for feedback. I had to do that a few times, a couple of rounds of revisions, and then you get a contract to write the book. So, yeah. So actually, like, I had help, is what I'm trying to say. I had professional help on how to like bring it together. And it definitely changed from where I started to where it ended up, as all writing should if you're listening to people, you know.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's such great um feedback and advice because it really is, finding the people that you can trust, that you connect with and having them support you on that journey, especially someone being that editor for sure.
Yeah.
Um
Yeah.
that's so helpful. Now, I want to pivot back to your time as a National Geographic Explorer and your organization. Can you talk to us a bit more about that, what you do, some of your programs, and really the role that storytelling plays into this?
Yeah, I mean, it's so much fun and such an honor to do the work that we do. At this point, we have 15 sites across the country and growing. Um, so here's the thing about 2892. Sometimes it's kind of hard to describe what we do, but the essence of it is that it is youth-led, place-based programming. And we have a true co-design model. So what that means is we don't come in and say, this is how you do 2892. Like we don't tell people how to do it. We have a menu of options and we have kind of a checklist of things that we need to make sure that we're addressing in order for it to align to our work. Um, but we really get out of the way. I mean, we find great teams, we work with awesome youth, and we spend a lot of time just supporting them and getting out of the way. Um, and so that runs the gamut from our program in Ogden City in Utah is doing youth-led storytelling. It's through the mayor's office, so it's through the city office, and they created this really cool like ambassador fellowship model where they brought in young people, they recruited them, and then they paired them with professionals who create podcasts. And then they did this kind of historical research and they looked at things through the history of their community. And then they're putting out this podcast series that is a series of interviews about different aspects of their community. Um, that are rooted in history, but also just addressing things that are on top of mind. So there's that. We also do a lot of work with like GIS and mapping, because I feel like when you're looking at things from a place-based standpoint, like mapping can be a really cool tool that a lot of kids don't have access to. So like our work in Denver, for example, we're in year 2 of that, and we have again amazing educators on the ground who are supporting these young people. And we train them in how to use GIS tools. And then we support them through the process as they do things like They learn how to do like community asset mapping. They learn how to like collect survey data and then transmit that over to a map. They learn how to take any kind of data sets and then apply them to place, through GIS. And then they take those things and they present them to community members to try to move change forward. So it's really cool. And so those are just two examples. We have, again, there's no one way to do it. There's a lot of our teams are doing just really cool work, and we just support them in that effort. And your question about how does storytelling play a role? I mean, again, I'm a teacher, I'm a writer, I was an English teacher. So um, to me, there's no other way. I don't know how to think. I don't know how to not think in stories. I don't know how there's any way to create change other than creating a story or, pulling a story up that can move people. Um, you know?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm curious where the name came from too. Can you tell us
Yeah.
about that?
So, at the time when I was creating the vision, I asked a million people for advice, again, smarter than me. And one person suggested this idea of um, because it was going to be place-based, looking at different points in the US and then seeing what the numbers were. And so I did that. And so if you take there's multiple ways to measure across the contiguous United States, but um, if you take one point in the Northeast and one point in the Southwest, one of the numbers you get is 2,892 miles. So I picked that. And that's kind of where the miles to go ultimately means this. Um, there's no one way to like snap our fingers and fix history that has caused harm, or not history that has caused harm, but fix historical moments that are rooted in harm and address issues that are harmful. And so this idea of miles to go is really this understanding that like the work keeps going. There's no way, like, and that's one of the things we hold dear with 2892 is like we try really hard not to do one and done. We don't want to do one event and then that's it. We want to make sure that the work sustains long after we're gone. Um, and often the work's already happening while we're there, or before we get there. But this whole idea of 2892 is really symbolic in that there's a lot of work to be done across the country to kind of uncover these narratives that are not acknowledged, address these issues that get overlooked, um, and so forth. And I will say our Hawaii team, was like, wait a minute. Um, so we do recognize and understand that the number is symbolic and is not meant to be exclusive. So
Absolutely. I love that. I love that. And just coming up with the names of an organization. I mean, it is such a unique journey and an empowering one. So I always like to ask that in terms of where people came up with the name of something. Um, we always have young women submit questions, and a common question and thread that came up for you was your advice, especially when it comes to your just that you've had such a diverse career, right? And the question has to do with how do you continue to feel empowered and empower others when you and especially so many women are often overlooked, underestimated, judged in certain ways. What advice do you have to help people just keep going and moving forward and want to create change?
yeah, I mean that's tough. I mean, I would be a liar if I sat here and told you that there weren't low moments. I mean, now's one. There are moments where you start to kind of like feel frustrated, like, am I making an impact? Like, are things happening? Um, I think for me, I come from a long line of awesome country people, who have really, that's where when my editors suggested the name Underestimated to Unstoppable, it really hit me because I've spent a lot of my life being underestimated. And, someone in my family said at one point, I think it's funny when Ashley's underestimated because I like to sit back and watch and see what happens, you know? And so to me, it's almost like being underestimated in some ways is a superpower because um, I find that like people aren't paying attention until you're like making ripples and waves, you know? Um, and that's a good thing because at that point it's already in motion before anybody knows what hit them, you know? So like I guess the advice is, you know, stay true. I mean, that's really like the essence of what my book is about. You know, for example, so I have in the book there are these four core drives. And for me, it's like I have to create. I have to be creative. If if I am not in a position of creating, then I'm not thriving. And I know lots of people, I have to have relationships or people who I have to care about the cause or it's worthless to me. And so I think so much of it is recentering, constantly recentering to your core of like what matters most to you and where do you thrive? Because I'll end up on like a weird journey and I'll kind of look up and I'm like, I don't like this anymore, you know, or whatever it is, like whether it's like a contract or a project or whatever. And I'll look up and realize I'm not into this now. And it's usually because somewhere along the way I lost myself. You know, it's somewhere along the way I made a choice, I accepted a concession, something that got me off my path and sometimes it can be painful to get back on. Sometimes it means saying no. Sometimes it means disappointing people. Sometimes it means disappointing yourself if you feel the sense of responsibility. But I think again, I don't think it's easy. I think it's a constant inner dialogue, you know, around moving change. I think is ultimately about being true to yourself because I think otherwise you're going to burn out. If you're trying to be out there, you know, doing stuff that doesn't feel right to you, um, and here's a clue for me. I'm rambling at this point. I'm sorry. Here's a clue for me. When I know I'm off path, here's a clue. Do I feel undervalued? Am I chasing or am I attracting? And those things for me are like, okay, like if somebody's not answering their emails and you're getting frustrated and then you start to feel undervalued, like I don't matter to them enough to respond. You know, just little things like that. When I start to see a pattern of stuff like that happening, it's like I got to go somewhere else because you're not going to get anything done if people don't see you, and the only way to make them see you is to be true to who you are.
I love that so much. That is so powerful. And it's so true. Noticing that, and especially starting young with that, if you realize that you're not being valued in the environment that you're in, right? You can't settle for that. No,
Yeah.
that's so, so powerful. Um, my favorite question to ask, and I'm really excited for your answer, is the famous unique question I ask at the end of all of these about unleashing your inner queen. So, two-part question. First part is, what does unleashing your inner queen mean to you? And along with that, how do you unleash your inner queen?
Hmm. Good question. I mean, I love the work you do around this idea of being a queen. Like there's something just so regal about thinking about that and all of us having some inner version of that. Which is kind of what I was talking about, you know, that the core of who you are. I used to be obsessed with Cleopatra and Nefertiti, and I read all these historical fiction. I read this amazing biography on Cleopatra. And the thing about Cleopatra is that talk about somebody that was bold,
Mhm.
that unrelenting in terms of who they were, you know, completely authentic to the point of like their own detriment, you know, her own detriment, you know. Um, and just making bold decisions that were true to her for her vision, for what she wanted her kingdom to be. And so, like, when I think about a queen, that's like the first person that comes to mind for me because I think really queens, but any leader. I need them to be bold. I
Hmm.
need them to make a choice um, that is sometimes a target on your back in order to do what's right. I think that the world is craving more leadership like that. And I think the world needs more queens who are willing to be bold and make those kind of choices, especially, I don't know, I think it's really important to keep to the center of who you are.
Hmm. Absolutely. And you are certainly that queen, being bold and inspiring so many people. It's just really incredible. Now, if people want to get in touch with you or learn more about your work, what's the best way that they can do that?
Um, well, I have a website, ashleylamb.sinclair.com, and I kind of house everything there, try to keep it in one space. These days, social media is, a giant question mark for me, but LinkedIn is an easy place that I'll probably stay. Um, I also have an Instagram, a public Instagram that's brand new and honestly not super populated with content yet. But it's Ashley Lamb-Sinclair underscore author on Instagram. Those are probably the best ways. Excuse me.
I mean, thank you so much for taking the time, for joining us, for sharing your expertise, and just for all the work that you do, not only empowering educators, but also just so many young people. It's just so inspiring and powerful. So thank you.
Thank you.